Night. The girl, sitting on the bed, looks at her hands, not understanding what happened. Placing her hand on the bed, she discovers that the sheet is too hard. Taking a closer look, she discovers Archduke Glenn underneath her. Moonlight falls on his beautiful sleeping face. She can't take her eyes off him. A half-naked man with his hands tied lies directly under her. Realizing this, the girl gets scared and blushes. She can't believe that this is happening in reality. In a half-fainting state, it seemed crazy to her. She wondered what she had done, blaming herself for Vivian Lewis going crazy. The girl assumed that she had kidnapped the Archduke. She was only 14 when the Archduke attracted her attention. It was at a debutante ball, a place brimming with the hopes and dreams of young and noble alike. Vivian hoped to meet a handsome, young man and begin a romantic relationship. Archduke Glenn entered the ballroom. The ladies admired his beauty. He walked down the long steps towards the guests. Lennox Elpidian Glenn. He was 18 then. At 17, he inherited the title, and the attitudes of those around him changed accordingly. He shone like a diamond. That's when Vivian fell in love with him. She is the type of person who falls in love easily. Her heart fluttered just from looking at him. Thus began 7 years of her fanaticism. The girl was glad that she could draw well, otherwise she would not have been able to capture every moment with the Archduke. This was the only way she could secretly admire him without anyone knowing, with the exception of her family members and loved ones. Vivian thought that if she hired an artist to paint 10,000 pictures, he would probably think she was crazy. In her room, there were many pictures of Glenn, pillows with his face. She thought it was beautiful and wanted to live forever admiring it and not get married. She squeezed the pillow and said how she didn't want to get married. The lady standing behind her asked if she was thinking about it again. Vivian turned around and saw Marina. She rushed to hug her. Marina asked how long the girl was going to admire the Archduke. She replied that dreams of him make her happy. Eagerly sharing her feelings, she described the joy of creating paintings with the Archduke and inventing love stories. Marina expressed concern about the girl's future loneliness due to these fantasies. Vivian was indignant. She will never be alone. She has a younger brother, Kasian. Marina asked if Kasian had never looked at her with compassion. Marina stroked Vivian's head soothingly. She had to go somewhere, so she asked her to take care of it, and gave her her shoulder bag. Vivian asked what it was. The girl warned her that these were her things, and they were dangerous, so she should not open the bag. Having said this, she said goodbye and left, promising to return soon. Marina has magic. She studies at the academy in the capital of the empire. Since her hometown is too far from her studies, she stays with us, feeling indebted to them. Vivian put her bag on the sofa and sat down, looking at the album filled with drawings of the Archduke. She really wanted to look into the bag, especially after she was forbidden to do so. The girl thought that nothing would happen if she glanced at it briefly, and decided to just look and immediately close it. Marina never showed her anything dangerous. She assumed it was because Vivian was like a little sister to her. Closing the album, she headed to her bag, wondering how long Marina would perceive her as a child. The girl took the bag in her hands, thinking that she would just look in and put it back. Suddenly, the album falls, and some of the drawings are damaged and scattered around the room. With tears in her eyes, she swept the floor asking her creatures for forgiveness for not being able to protect them. She would be embarrassed to call the maids after causing all this mess. Sitting down on the floor, putting the album together, she notices a large black ball on the floor. She took it in her hands and looked at her reflection. Deciding to put it in her bag, she headed towards it, but tripped and dropped the ball, breaking it into pieces. She looked at the fragments with tears in her eyes, not knowing what to do, because it was Marina's thing. Vivian only had memories before the ball appeared. Now, she sat on the floor in front of the bed, with Glenn tied up, and thought that it would be better not to open Marina's bag. The awakened Archduke called out to her. He asked why she didn't finish what she started, which caused even more bewilderment at what was happening. Glenn looked straight at her and flirtatiously said that he would prefer Lady Vivian to continue what she started. The girl was very embarrassed by his desire. She thought she had kidnapped the Archduke, still wondering how he could be so calm. Vivian couldn't believe that someone like her could kidnap the swordmaster and tie him to the bed. It was unthinkable how she dared to kidnap his person. In her imagination, he should have grabbed the sword and attacked Vivian in a rage, threatening to kill the kidnapper. The Archduke turned to the girl again. He asked why Lady Vivian was so upset. He acted as if nothing bad had happened. Sitting on the floor opposite the bed, The confused girl still could not believe that at the age of 21 she could kidnap the Archduke. She was sure that the officers would burst in immediately. Vivian fearfully thought that everyone would see her room full of drawings of the Archduke and be horrified. Her hobby will be condemned, considered creepy and creepy. Glenn tried to calm the girl down and suggested that she come closer. She perked up, asking for forgiveness. Vivian offered to untie her hands. The Archduke reassured her and said that everything was fine. Rushing to untie her hands, Vivian blamed herself for tying her lover's hands too tightly. She couldn't believe that she had damaged the Archduke's body. The girl began to examine Glenn's hands, considering them very beautiful, and now there were traces of ropes on his wrists. Her eyes filled with tears, she reproached herself more and more for what had happened. With one hand, he took her hand. With the other, he hugged her head and calmed her down. He said that everything was fine, and this wound was nothing to him. Vivian excitedly asked him if he knew that he had been kidnapped, and that she was the kidnapper. In response, the Archduke admitted that he liked being tied up, and that tied people turned out to be the girl's taste. The girl looked at Glenn and couldn't believe why he was still so affectionate with her if they hadn't even communicated before. The thought flashed through her mind that he had gone crazy from the kidnapping. Frightened, she decided to make sure that everything was okay with the Archduke. Vivian stuck out her middle finger to him and asked how many fingers he could see. He replied that there was only one finger. Then Vivian asked the full name of the Archduke, to which Lennox heard Elpidian Glenn. She noted that he seemed to still be of sound mind. Vivian couldn't understand why he was so gentle with her. Was it just his imagination? Or was he really enjoying the situation? Glenn sat opposite and addressed the girl, calling her name. The girl responded, trembling with excitement. And then he said that he had heard that she wanted intimacy with him. Vivian, stuttering with excitement, tried to resist him. Then the Archduke approached her. Vivian pressed herself against the bed, and he said that he heard that she wanted to do this from the moment she first saw him. Glenn gently took her hand, leaned down and touched her palm with his lips. Vivian froze with excitement. Her heart at that moment was fluttering like never before. Was this really all happening to her? He held her hand. Worried, Vivian could not come to her senses about what was happening. Was it all real? And he really kissed her palm. The Archduke was so close. It seemed that the girl's lifelong dream had come true. If not for one fact, they were both in Vivian's room, full of pictures and things that screamed about her fanatical inclination towards Glenn. And so the truth that she had hidden for so long was revealed. The fact that she was a fan of the Archduke for 7 whole years. They sat on the bed in a room full of pictures, toys, and even a pillow with Glenn's picture on it. The thought crept into Vivian's head whether she was in the tiger's den. It was just her bedroom, but the problem was that the Archduke she had captured was here. Vivian was very worried about what Glenn thought when he saw the room decorated with his portraits. She assumed something like, "I was stolen by a real stalker." Then, the Archduke is now stalling for time because he is waiting for the kidnapper's demands. And the girl turned to the man, explaining that this was a misunderstanding. But what she was going to do to him, no matter how you look at it, was some kind of shamelessness. She tied him up and tried. She didn't know how to explain to him that she didn't do everything on purpose. She just liked watching him from the sidelines. It would be enough that he would remember her as the sweet girl who had once greeted him. But she believed that she had ended up becoming an unscrupulous kidnapper. Vivian wondered if she should make some kind of excuse. However, this is pointless, but it is better than sitting in silence. Glenn, at this time, was squeezing a pillow with his image on it. The girl distracted him by saying that his abduction was unplanned. This is a mistake. She said that recently a strange black bead fell out of her hands and broke. Vivian wondered what the bead was. Due to her obsession with the Archduke, she never entered into relationships with other men. Until she was 16, the hope for mutual feelings still smoldered in her chest. But as she got older, she realized the harsh reality of what was happening. A girl from a poor family should never be near the Archduke, but somewhere deep inside she wanted to kidnap him. Did the black bead really only expose her lusts? If so, the parents in Kasian will be shocked when they find out. She waited for him to say something. Glenn said that he understood everything. She broke a strange black bead left by a sorceress friend, and she was enveloped in smoke. Afterwards, she didn't remember anything, and when she regained consciousness, she realized that she had kidnapped him. The girl exclaimed joyfully that everything was exactly like that. Looking at him, Vivian thought that even though it was dark at night, she was blinded by the insane beauty of the Archduke. She hoped that everything was resolved now. Glenn asked if she thought he would believe it. The girl tensed. He continued, saying that she kidnapped him and made up such a ridiculous thing. In panic, the girl screamed, insisting that she was right. She was afraid that if crowds of his fans found out that she had stolen it, they would not only stigmatize her in society, but also put her in prison. She couldn't let this happen. Marrying the Archduke was no longer her goal. She just wanted to live as his fan. An ordinary, happy life, like everyone else, is enough. It all started with a few paintings, and then there was no stopping her, and his portraits filled the room. The Archduke never harmed anyone. Vivian really wanted to go back in time and not touch Marina's bag. Tears streamed down the girl's face. Glenn gently touched her cheek, wiping the tears from her face. The man hugged her and pressed her to him, saying that she was very kind. Vivian asked why the Archduke was so affectionate. She again started talking about how the black bead was to blame for everything. Glenn stroked the girl's head and agreed soothingly. Vivian turned around, asking if he liked this situation. The man, covering his bare chest, began to deny, saying he's scared to death because Vivian stole him. The girl insisted that this was not a kidnapping, but a misuse of magical tools. Accident. Vivian thought how he infuriated her. Had he really always had such a character? But beautiful. Oh, this sinful beauty. Glenn asked what they would do anyway, emphasizing that soon his knights will be here and she will have to go to jail. The girl grabbed her head in horror, screaming that it was terrible. The man took her hand, asking her not to pull out such wonderful hair. He offered a way out of this difficult situation. He took her hands and knelt before her, saying that she could become his mistress. The girl was surprised at this solution to the problem. She thought he was crazy, but his eyes were beautiful. She asked if the Archduke was really inviting her to become his mistress, to which she received a positive answer. He leaned his head against her knees, secretly wanting her to become his bride. She believed that such a proposal was appropriate only after the young people had met at least a little. She felt awkward. The Archduke is a great nobleman of the Elfadar Empire, a powerful man who controls half of the entire country. Someone who possesses wealth and power comparable to that of the emperor cannot marry the daughter of an obscure count. In addition, there are rumors that the Archduke is going to enter into a political marriage with a princess of another state. Accordingly, only she will become his legal wife. She came to the conclusion that they would meet for a while and then go their separate ways. Glenn asked if she agreed. The girl hesitated. He knows very well that she has no other choice to explain the situation with the kidnapping. The phrase, "we are in a relationship," is best suited. It dawned on Vivian that perhaps Marina would be able to prove her innocence when she talked about the black bead. But she is not from an influential family, so there is a high probability that Marina's testimony will not be considered. Then there is only one way out. Vivian decisively said that she would become the Archduke's mistress, however, subject to the conclusion of a love contract. She thought she couldn't help but thank herself for this brilliant idea. If they sign a contract, they can establish how long their relationship will last, how it will end, and how far it can go. She didn't think the Archduke would want anything more than kisses, but who knows? She couldn't vouch for herself either. He was too attractive. Perhaps he has a cunning plan. Glenn stood up, looking sadly at the girl, then pressed himself against her knees again and asked if the love contract meant that Lady Vivian was not going to seriously date him. It was the first time she had talked with the Archduke for so long, and she did not understand what kind of close relationship we could be talking about. In the end, she kidnapped him herself. Glenn asked how long Vivian wanted the contract for. She was confused because she didn't know how long they usually signed, for months or years, and suggested a contract for 6 months. The Archduke was upset about why exactly 6 months. Vivian thought this was too much and reduced the period to 4 months. This angered him even more. Vivian then apologized, deciding to offer 2 months. She didn't know how much she should say, assuming he didn't like the idea of a contract, but he was the one who offered to be his mistress. The girl thought that she had misunderstood something. He may not want a contractual relationship. Glenn took the girl by the hand and told her the term was 1 year. Vivian opened her mouth in surprise. He smiled, looking into her eyes and waiting for an answer. Vivian hung her head sadly, thinking it had taken too long. And then Glenn said, even though he thought it wouldn't be enough, and the girl immediately agreed to a contract for a period of 1 year. The man asked to take an oath. She looked at him, wondering if it was really that important. His face was serious, and she exhaled. Raising one hand, Vivian said, "She, Vivian Lewis, swears it." Entering into a pact with the great Archduke Lennox Glenn for a period of 1 year. Glenn raised his hand and said the same oath at the same time as Vivian. The girl thought they were making a vow that they would maintain contractual love. Is this normal? Looks like blasphemy. The Archduke patted the girl on the head, saying how well done she was. Blushing, she asked why he suddenly spoke in formal speech. He bowed, emphasizing that they were now on official terms. Therefore, from now on, he will address her with respect. She was very embarrassed. She noticed how caring he was. Glenn agreed, calling the girl his sweet Vivian, which made her cheeks even redder. She assumed that she had heard it all. Vivian waved her hand in front of him, suggesting that the Archduke had hit his head while she was stealing it. She was embarrassed by his presence in her room full of portraits of the Archduke. She thought it would be best to get Glenn out of here. Deciding to give an unobtrusive hint, the girl asked what they should do. Emphasizing that the night was quite long, she thought it was better for the man to return home. Glenn asked what he should do there alone. He touched her face, asking if it would be better to continue what he started. The girl was scared. She didn't remember at all what they were doing. The man emphasized that he was almost naked, hinting that it was not he who took off his clothes. Hesitating, he corrected his words, saying that his clothes were not taken off, but torn to shreds, pointing his finger at the remains of his shirt on the floor. The girl crouched down in panic, holding her head. She couldn't believe that she could do such a thing, but there was no one else in the room except them. The man put his hand on Vivian's shoulders, saying that a little more and she would be completely hairless. Although he had to admit that even doing this, she looked charming. These words inspired Vivian. Looking at the Archduke, she joyfully said that even if he were bald, he would still look beautiful. He thanked her, assuring her that the tattered things were not worth her worries. He took her hands, saying that the main thing is that Vivian wants this. She kept thinking, and couldn't understand why Glenn was so kind. Previously, he looked like a sculpture made of ice, and he even had the nickname Ice Nobleman. Her peers really liked this type. The Archduke she knew rarely smiled, and he was not at all friendly. She asked herself if it was okay to become his girlfriend, even though they had a contract. The Archduke is so favorable to her. Perhaps it's because of Marina's magical little thing. And all the sudden outbursts of feelings occurred under the influence of the bead. This thought haunted her. Vivian turned to the Archduke, and he suggested that the girl had figured out what they would do next. And with a radiant smile and sparkle in his eyes, he looked at her. The girl denied it, saying that she was talking about something else. She thought that the Archduke was not referring to playing the piano, and I felt very awkward from the rapid development of their relationship. Hesitating a little, she asked what he thought when he first saw her room. The girl nervously clutched the hem of her nightgown. Glenn looked around and thought silently. The pause made her feel even more awkward. The man finally said he thought he really liked Vivian. He sat on the floor next to her and giggled sweetly. She was surprised that he was not affected by what he saw. She thought she was lucky he wasn't angry, but this reaction was strange. Vivian shook her head, trying not to freak herself out. Glenn asked what was bothering her. The girl asked how far their love contract would go. The Archduke asked in response what she wanted. Vivian suggested that a hug should be enough. Seeing Glenn's serious face, she panicked, suggesting that they just hold hands, because hugging was too close. The man asked why it was too close. Vivian reminded that it was just a contract. Glenn gently took her hand, saying that although this was a contract, they were now in a relationship. Her cheeks turned pink. He stroked her hair, saying hugs, kisses, and everything else. Vivian, as if spellbound, repeated his last words. The Archduke slid his hand to her lips. Vivian thought it was dangerous to go further, since they were still officially free, and she hesitantly said that there are rumors about his wedding. Glenn asked who. Since the Archduke is from the upper strata of society, an arranged marriage does not raise any questions for him. Aristocrats often do not marry for love for the well-being of their family. This applies to both her parents and Marina's parents, even her brother Kasian. Since the Archduke is a famous nobleman, he is forced to marry the princess. Since the Duke's mother was of royal blood, he has the right to marry someone from the ruling dynasty. Vivian thought that she was saying quite obvious things, so why didn't the Archduke understand her? He hugged the girl tightly. Glenn looked into Vivian's eyes. He was so close that the girl almost lost consciousness. He slid his hand along her neck, placing it on her shoulder, and asked if he could kiss her. The girl panicked. Glenn's eyes lit up, and he said, "First they will kiss, then they will move on, and someday they will get married." Vivian's eye was already twitching. She didn't know what to do. Perhaps she should hit the Archduke so that he would come to his senses. While she was thinking, Glenn touched her neck and kissed her tenderly. Vivian was very surprised. She was kissing the Archduke himself, and it was not just a peck on the lips, but a real kiss. It's like they're a real couple. The thought crept into Vivian's head that someone might see them, and she began to resist. Her resistance made her feel short of breath, and Glenn stopped the kiss, saying that she should breathe when she kisses. She felt embarrassed. The Archduke laughed, and stroking her head, kissed the girl on the forehead. He asked how long she had liked him. The girl hesitated. She could not tell the Archduke that she had been following him for 7 years. This will raise too many questions. He asked if she had strong feelings for him. Vivian, after thinking a little, replied, "The Archduke looks like something unattainable." Initially, the Archduke was the first innocent crush, and now she trembles, just looking at him for a moment. He is like a distant star shining in the sky. But talking about a serious relationship in their situation with the Archduke makes no sense. After all, in a year they will disperse like ships at sea. It was as if nothing had happened. She tried to convince herself not to believe in this fairy tale situation seriously. Glenn hoped that Vivian would feel comfortable around him, and as he said this, he gently kissed her hand. He looked at her happily, saying that now he could tell her parents that they were officially dating. She wondered if their relationship was really like an official one. There was a noise outside. The girl ran to the window in panic. Pulling back the curtains, she saw men with torches. Taking a closer look, Vivian saw in front of them the coat of arms of Archduke Glenn. The Archduke looked out the window and said, "Here are the knights," praising their efforts, because they almost found him. Vivian panicked. Now was not the time for jokes. She ran around the room looking for a shirt. She came up with the idea of borrowing Cajun's clothes. Heading towards the exit, she asked the Archduke to wait for her here. Glenn sat down on the bed and smiled sweetly at her. In the dressing room, Vivian tried to find a shirt as quickly as possible, grabbing the right one. She assumed that she took her father's shirt, but there was no time, so she took it to her room. Servants were heard talking in the corridor, and Vivian froze. They were discussing the theft of the Archduke, and the fact that there was a witness who saw the thief with the same hair as the mistress. She rushed into the room. Vivian burst into the room and was relieved to see the Archduke there alone. He poured water into a glass and handed it to her, offering her a drink. The girl grabbed the glass and drank it in one gulp, handing over the shirt. Glenn put the shirt on, praising how well it fit and how soft it was. The man thanked Vivian. She was very embarrassed to receive gratitude, knowing that she herself tore it. The butler knocked on the door. The time has come. Vivian believed that since she and the Archduke were in a relationship, the situation would no longer seem strange. She decided to explain that she did not kidnap him, but simply brought him to her room. Although this option did not seem to her the best. After all, they are not even engaged, and she dragged the Archduke into the bedroom. After this, her reputation will go down the drain. She thought that after the contract expired, she would meet an ordinary person and finally get married. However, if nothing is done now, you will have to live with your parents for the rest of your life. Will she be able to achieve something through self-education? Vivian draws and writes well. Perhaps she can become an author of fairy tales. It's not bad. The butler at the door insisted that she open it. Glenn asked if she was ready. The girl answered decisively in the affirmative. He leaned towards her and said that he was sure she would soon get used to everything. Vivian laughed nervously. She felt like she was walking through a minefield. If she had not kidnapped the Archduke, she would have been able to live an ordinary life. The man kissed her on the cheek, trying to calm her down. They held hands. For Vivian, each time these touches felt like the first time. After all, they kissed not so long ago. The girl grabbed the Archduke and dragged him away. She was sure the butler would be shocked. Due to the large number of responsibilities, he developed indigestion and lost part of his hair. She touched the doorknob, mentally asking the butler for forgiveness. Opening the door, he cried out that the lady had become a criminal. Vivian denied everything, trying to explain the situation. She said that the Archduke was in her room because they were having a secret meeting. The butler, wiping tears from his face, said how he could now look into the eyes of his master and madam, emphasizing how Miss has wised up. He was heartbroken. Vivian was worried, of course, which is understandable. Previously, she had absolutely no contact with the Archduke, and then she suddenly announced that they were now dating. Anyone would have suspected something was wrong, but it's true, even if they signed a contract. Vivian grabbed the butler by the shoulders, convincing him that their relationship was real. She was not crazy. The man said in a trembling voice that he believed Vivian. But what about those wedding rumors? Wasn't Miss planning to get married this year? The girl awkwardly looked away, saying that for now she was only thinking about it. The butler said he had already sent their portraits. It's good that only a week has passed since these rumors spread. Vivian asked what rumors we were talking about. The butler replied that it was about the wedding, and that it attracted the attention of a wealthy man. A crunch was heard. The Archduke's doorknob broke in his hands. Vivian and the butler looked at him in surprise. He just smiled, emphasizing how flimsy the handle was. Vivian wondered if she was made of gold-plated steel. In addition, the handle had screws screwed in. How could he even break it? Perhaps it's all because of the swordmaster's strength. She remembered Cassian saying that all swordsmen were monsters, so his words are true. For some reason, her relationship with the Archduke now frightened her, and she said, "It's good that in a year they will break up." Glenn, barely hiding his anger, asked if Vivian had said something. The girl hesitated, then asked if they would break off their relationship with him after a year. The Archduke, smiling, replied that he was not sure of that. Vivian was very excited by his answer. He approached her, asking for an apology. He said that he did not remember such an agreement. The girl panicked. She didn't know what to do if he pretended that he didn't know about the term of the contract. She screamed. If the Archduke didn't keep his promise, there might be trouble. She asked if they were in a relationship. He just looked at her silently with a mysterious smile. Vivian touched his hand. He left her no choice. It's time for the face that Vivian uses when she needs something from her brother or parents. She begged the Archduke to tell him if they were a couple. The Archduke laughed, closing his eyes. The girl did not understand his reaction. Hanging down, she wondered if he was just playing with her feelings. So, all this time the Archduke was pretending. Or perhaps the sight of her made him laugh. Cassian also smiles when Vivian asks for something, but he never laughs. The Archduke asked her who she was to him. She assumed that she was the Archduke's girlfriend. The man smiled joyfully, saying, "For a start, let it be like this." Vivian was surprised by this, for starters. She assumed that the Archduke meant that depending on her actions, he would treat her as either a kidnapper or a girl. She had to remain a girl in his memories at all costs. She screamed, "Thank you." The Archduke laughed even harder. Vivian asked why he laughs all the time. She had the feeling that he was teasing her. Turning around, she said that she thought that the butler had absolutely no idea what they were talking about. Vivian emphasized that it was better to go outside before the screaming outside the window began to get even louder. The Archduke's knights looked intimidating, but Vivian was sure that her family also had good warriors. Everything needs to be clarified before it comes to a collision. She took the Archduke's hand and resolutely shouted that they needed to go. Glenn spoke. He had something to tell Vivian. He turned her towards him, saying that she was more than just a girl to him. He wanted her to know this. She was very embarrassed. The girl thought that the Archduke was hinting that she was also a thief. Going down the stairs, they opened the doors and went out into the street. They were met by worried parents and Cassian. Vivian tried to explain the situation, saying that in fact she and the Archduke, but she was interrupted by condemnatory shouts. The warriors believed that they had been fooled, and this smacks of high treason. The girl panicked. This was a real disaster. She needed to say something urgently. She turned to the Archduke, plaintively demanding that they explain everything. Glenn agreed with her. Smiling joyfully, he took her in his arms, saying that now no one would think that she kidnapped him. Vivian had a feeling that they were going to kidnap her. She was very embarrassed. The Archduke was so close, but now the main thing is to resolve this situation. The knights were shocked when they saw His Highness Lennox heading towards them with Vivian in his arms. The warriors of the Vivian family only looked at the lady questioningly. She waved at them awkwardly. The warriors assumed that the girl stole the Archduke using black magic. She was outraged by this assumption. In the entire empire, Only a few magicians who have received permission from the crown prince are allowed to use black witchcraft. If it turns out that she was somehow involved in him, Vivian and her family will be executed immediately. She screamed, how could she use black magic? She didn't understand it at all. She doesn't even have the strength to practice fencing, let alone use any magic. Listening to the lady, the warrior sighed awkwardly. The warrior, turning to the knights, said that it was true. The miss had given up witchcraft a long time ago. It seemed quite complicated to her. And the lady didn't even look in the direction of the sword, because fencing can cause calluses. She doesn't have any superpowers. Miss and very sweet, but nature did not endow her with talents. The knight took the hilt of his sword, asking what about the testimony of their witness, who claims that their lady kidnapped His Highness. The warrior suggested that he could have lied. The Archduke intervened in the conversation, saying that he would explain everything. Glenn said decisively, Vivian Lewis is his girlfriend. Having said this, he turned around and walked away. The knights could not believe their ears. Vivian's father called out to His Highness, asking what he had just said. The Archduke repeated, his daughter is the person he loves. The knight took out his sword and pointed it at them. Glenn asked if Lord Royd was tired of living. The man shouted that His Highness was out of his mind. He is sure that this witch has bewitched him. The Archduke coldly asked if he had heard correctly that he had called his girlfriend a witch. Is he ready to take responsibility for his words? Vivian thought that for knights, being responsible, as she knew it, meant giving up one's life. The Archduke continued, asking whether the knight really valued his life so much. The knight trembled. He dropped his sword and fell to his knees. Glenn said that when they returned, he would come up with a punishment for this indecent behavior. He ordered the knight to raise his sword and move away. Everyone present began to discuss their relationship. They still believed that they were a couple. The knight said, what then happened to Princess Eunice? After all, they were a successful union. Someone objected, arguing that this problem was not for them to solve, but for His Highness. Eunice is the princess of the southern country of Evron, the first heir to the throne. Vivian assumed that she herself had proposed to the Archduke. This wedding would be very beneficial, both for the Empire and for the Archduke himself. Vivian stopped those thoughts. She should have been glad that she wasn't accused of kidnapping. She thought that she was very lucky when she could still pull out such a lucky ticket. Glenn asked what she was thinking about. Vivian hesitated, saying that she would tell her when they were alone. The Archduke said it could be arranged right now. He knew he still needed to explain everything to Vivian's family and his knights. How burdensome is the title of Archduke? Instead of all this, he would now like to be in the same bed with Vivian. The girl was very embarrassed. The knights looked at the couple, and one of them cried out, had they seen this madness? Mr. Lennox laughed. This was the first time they had seen such behavior from the Archduke. It seemed like they were going to have nightmares today. After all, the devil himself emerged from the depths of hell and bared his teeth. Having placed Vivian, the Archduke stood in front of the knights, asking, despite all the difficulties, they decided to break into the Count's house. The knights bowed and asked for forgiveness for what they had done. After talking with the knights, Glenn turned to Vivian. Now he needs to discuss everything with her family. She happily agreed, and Glenn smiled at her. The girl blushed, thinking that his smile was like a blooming spring flower. It was chilly outside. She was shivering, worried that the Archduke would freeze in just his shirt. Noticing Vivian's trembling, the man asked if she was cold. The girl denied, and Glenn hugged her. Vivian blushed. She was very embarrassed. He said that she should get used to it. Vivian's entire family watched their tender embrace. The father, unable to bear it, called out to the Archduke. Having said that, they have so much to discuss. It is not proper to have a guest outside. The father suggested we go inside. The Archduke bowed to the Count, thanking him. Sitting by the fireplace, the father asked His Highness if he would continue to sit like this. Vivian was sitting on the Archduke's lap. Vivian, realizing the shamelessness of the situation, made an attempt to escape, but Glenn held her by the waist and put her back. The Archduke asked to forgive him, but he did not want to part with Vivian for a minute. The girl was outraged by his behavior. She believed that he did not need to try so hard to play a loving guy. It was just a contract. In the future, he will still marry Princess Eunice. His smile looked the same as Casian's when he teases her. She offendedly got off the Archduke and sat down next to him. There was an awkward pause. The father suggested continuing the conversation. Glenn agreed, naming his father Earl of Lewis. Vivian noticed that her father liked it when the Archduke addressed him like that. The mother offered the Archduke warm tea to help him warm up. Kasian knew that the Archduke was a swordsman, so he was more shocked than anyone else. Vivian thought he looked stupid. She wanted to draw him now and then mock him for the rest of her life. The father noticed that the shirt that His Highness was wearing was his favorite. Glenn apologized, saying he had nothing to wear. He will ask you to wash his shirt thoroughly and return it back, and as an apology, he will send another 100 of the same copies. The Count became agitated, stopping the Archduke. He was simply uncomfortable. Vivian shyly admired the Archduke. She thought that even when he was just drinking tea, the Archduke was incredibly charming. The Count asked whether His Highness was in a serious relationship with his daughter. The Archduke replied with all seriousness that it was true. Even though only a week had passed, his feelings for her were sincere. Everything went unexpectedly smoothly. Vivian felt uneasy. Kasian asked what His Highness liked so much about his sister. Vivian bristled at this question. The Archduke thought for a moment. She looked at him with the hope that he would come up with something plausible. Finally, Glenn said, "Vivian is very nice. She has cute round eyes. She also blushes funny when she's embarrassed, and if he asks for something, he contorts his face like a child. Therefore, wherever you look, there is a sweetheart." He asked with a completely innocent look if the older brother didn't think his little sister was charming. Kasian replied that he had not gone crazy yet. Interrupting Kasian's flattering speeches, his mother kicked him in the side, and the brother began to smile, correcting himself. That is, his sister is so beautiful that he is about to go crazy. After tea, the Archduke and Vivian went outside. The man said he had a great time today. Tomorrow morning he will send her a letter and a gift. Vivian was surprised. Glenn assured her that this was the basis of the relationship. This scared her even more. She had no idea how to behave because this was her first relationship. Vivian pouted, thinking that she would definitely need to consult with Marina. She wondered why she had not returned yet. Glenn turned the girl towards him and kissed her on the cheek. The Archduke smiled, saying it was a goodbye kiss, and wishing Vivian good night. The girl also wished the Archduke good night and went to her room. While in her room, Vivian jokingly hid a pillow with Glenn's picture on it, so she decided to take revenge on him for the sudden kiss. After that, she hugged her and apologized mockingly. The girl was still outraged by the Archduke's behavior. She lay down on the bed and thought. It seemed strange to her that in the time that had passed since the abduction, the Imperial investigator would have clearly arrived, which means the Knights did not report this to the search department. Hugging Glenn's pillow tightly, Vivian inhaled his scent, which was still lingering in the room. She still couldn't believe that this was really happening and that she was meeting him. The Knights beat Royd. They wanted to teach him a lesson. They didn't like where he was going. They threatened him, asking how he even dared to call the lady a witch. The Knights mockingly offered to hit him 100 more times. Perhaps then His Highness would forgive him. At home, Glenn began choosing gifts for Vivian. He decided that it would only be fresh flowers, yellow dahlias, or freesias. In his opinion, they would harmonize well with the girl's hair. The Archduke began to consult with his butler. Knowing that Vivian liked collections of poetry and novels, he doubted whether giving just a book would be enough. From the book, he switched to a ring that was to be made to order, or he wanted to give her a brooch or bracelet. He considered it all nonsense, and the joy from such gifts would quickly pass. Among all the gifts, Glenn chose a dress, shoes, and a brooch. The butler gave advice not to give shoes to his beloved girl, as she might run away after this. The Archduke confidently replied that Vivian would never do such a thing because she liked him too much. Having agreed on the gift, the butler said that everything would be prepared. Then Glenn thanked him, and after bidding each other good night, the servant left the room. When he came out, the butler thought that Glenn thanked him. This was so unusual. It seemed to him that the gentleman had matured. Left alone, the Archduke took out from a locked desk drawer the book, The Heir to a Great Empire is My Boyfriend, Notes from Vivi the Rabbit, and began to read it. Glenn couldn't understand why Vivian didn't keep the characters in the book secret, unless they usually take a pseudonym, which doesn't reveal their real identity in any way. He wondered if the day would come when he could read a book to her and how she would react to it. He had been waiting for this for so long. His heart is about to jump out of his chest. Before meeting Vivian, it was so insensitive that he even doubted its existence. A few years ago, ladies drink tea in the garden, discussing books. On the table are 3 books by the author Rabbit Vivi. Archduke, it's not a mistake. The Archduke likes the rabbit. Swordmaster Archduke. Vivi the rabbit is still with you. This time she bought 3 pieces. 1 for the collection, the 2nd to read, and the 3rd to show off. The girls were amazed and giggled cutely. Marie said that she came to show Vivi the rabbit's new book, but she couldn't find it on the table. Picking up the book from the ground, the Archduke approached them. Opening the book, he asked, "The heir to a great empire is my boyfriend." Some kind of novel. The girls panicked, and he read a couple of lines out loud. "I have no one but you, and you are the only person I love," said Archduke Lennox in his beautiful voice. Glenn smiled at the lady and asked if someone could explain to him what it was. He thought it was a meaningless romance novel in which he was the main character. Does anyone imagine him like this? The Archduke did not understand anything, as if he has a lot of extra time for such conversations. In sparring with Lord Royd, Glenn asked what kind of person he saw him as. He replied that he was, of course, the strongest swordsman. The Archduke emphasized that he was interested in personal qualities. Royd, confused, asked why he was asking such a thing. Glenn thought, even the knight who admires him the most didn't say anything like that. While the author wrote a whole veil of text, the book could not get out of the Archduke's head. Sitting in a chair, he thought perhaps it was worth calling an actor who would read these naive lines with expression. He found it funny. At this time, a servant stood in front of him, reading out the schedule. Tomorrow is a dance evening. Next week, an official dinner at the Marquise Maurice. Glenn wanted to know who Vivi the rabbit was, even though he still has no idea what to do after finding it. The handwriting clearly does not belong to a commoner, similar to the one that aristocrats write with. At the ball, the ladies greeted the Archduke. Glenn continued to speculate. In addition, this person is very familiar with high society and its culture, knows the rules of greeting and even seating rules. A young lady approached him, embarrassedly greeting His Highness Lennox. She immediately ran away. The Archduke thought that this girl always does this. A simple conclusion suggested itself to his reasoning. Rabbit Vivi is a representative of a noble family. The Archduke inspected the ball and the dancing ladies, assuming that Vivi the bunny should be here. Perhaps this is the owner of that strange look that he often feels on himself. The look does not carry hatred, but it is annoying and annoying. The next morning, the Archduke saddled his horse. The knight stopped him, saying that the gentleman was busy all the time and had not eaten anything since the morning. He replied that he needed to investigate something alone. When giving orders, do not tell the servants. Glenn set out on the road, wondering if he could say that he was going in search of the man who wrote a romance novel featuring him. After listening to the conversations of passers-by, he got a clue. So she is using the bookworm store as an intermediary. The Archduke thought he looked cute. It will probably be difficult for even 2 people to fit in it. The windows can't be opened that easily, and because of the mud, you can't see anything. It seems there's also a printing press here, but it doesn't look like this place can produce a quality book. Glenn was wearing a raincoat, the hood pulled over his face, and he was leafing through a book. The Archduke was hesitant to call this place a bookstore. However, if he is lucky, he might meet a rabbit here. Then he will catch her. A girl rushed past him, asking him to step aside. She happily turned to the Archduke, thanking him for letting her through. There was an awkward pause between them. Glenn was fascinated by the beauty of the young lady. He awkwardly covered his face with a book. Vivian apologized and went to the hostess. The girls greeted each other joyfully. The owner of the bookstore emphasized how long it had been since Miss had been here. A lot of people are asking about Vivi the rabbit's new job. So she kept trying to contact her. Vivian was happy to hear this, because she had just brought it. The Archduke, eavesdropping on them, concluded that the girl was Vivi the rabbit. Suddenly the hostess said, "Vivian brings new works by the author every time. She is very grateful to her." The girl objected, saying that she herself liked it. She asked to print and bind it. The store owner agreed with pleasure and wished the girl a good journey. Glenn thought for a moment. She said she brought a novel. She has well-groomed hair and skin, neat nails with a good manicure. The dress, although simple, is quite stylish. He had no doubt she was an aristocrat. A girl from a noble family goes unaccompanied. Glenn was watching the girl in the shopping area. Vivian and the children were looking at a huge apple. They were having fun together. The Archduke suggested that if she stumbled upon a criminal, it seemed to him that she was not afraid of anything at all. The merchant was telling Glenn, who was holding a bunny keychain, that this thing was selling well and was very popular with children because of the shape of the bunny. There are only a few pieces left. It wouldn't hurt for him to have time to buy them. Suddenly, it dawned on the Archduke. He had already seen the girl's face somewhere. He remembered the embarrassed girl from the ball. Earl Lewis's daughter is Vivian Lewis. Having bought a rabbit from a merchant, he was looking at it, muttering her name, when suddenly it dawned on him that Vivi's rabbit was short for Vivian's name. I chose such an obvious pseudonym. It was too easy. The Archduke watched Vivian at the reception. He thought she was probably going to fall again. At the last reception, she was caught 3 or 4 times. Glenn assumed it was a shoe issue, but the lady was wearing boots. Even with her boots on, she somehow manages to fall. Seeing the Archduke, the girl started to run. He sighed heavily. Vivian's falls do not concern him. Although her novel about their relationship is quite sweet in appearance, in terms of the plot the lovers look like kindergarten graduates. He wanted to look into her head. The Archduke met with the Marchioness Maurice. They greeted each other pleasantly. While the lady was talking to him, the Archduke's attention was focused on Vivian. He saw how the girl was collecting food from the table. He was puzzled by her behavior. Glenn wondered if they were starving her at home. He had never heard of the Earl of Lewis abusing his children. Vivian ran away somewhere again. The Marchioness flirtatiously asked if the Archduke would like to dance with her daughter. The man apologized. He needed to leave urgently. Maurice sadly wished the Archduke to find another dance partner. The Archduke fled after Lady Vivian. He wondered where she was rushing, constantly slipping, and now flying headlong. Glenn followed the girl into the imperial forest itself. He was worried about what would happen if the guards saw her. He was forced to follow her because there were many wild animals there. Vivian sat down on the grass, holding out a bag of lettuce and vegetables. Rabbits began to run towards her. The Archduke wondered if this was really helping his brother. The rabbits jumped next to Vivian, then even climbed onto her dress. One even licked her face. The girl laughed sweetly. Glenn thought she was very nice. There was a rustling sound. The Archduke turned around and saw the patrolmen. He rushed to Vivian and hid them. The knights checked the place where he was and left, assuming that it was their imagination. Vivian was surprised. The Archduke, releasing the girl from his embrace, asked if she understood that she had entered the lands of the Emperor. She looked at him with her big, lovely eyes and trembled. Then, for the first time, the Archduke saw a man whose eyes exuded, "I like you," and the one to whom these feelings were directed was him. Glenn touched Vivian's face and immediately pulled his hand back. Blushing, the Archduke said it was time to return to the ballroom. Vivian agreed, wiping tears from her face. The man looked at her, not understanding why his heart was beating so fast. He tried to pull himself together because she was still a child. Accompanying the girl to the ballroom, Glenn carefully led her by the hand. Vivian asked if the Archduke remembered her. The man said, "Young Miss Lewis, who always says hello and immediately runs away. She was very sweet and friendly. That's how he remembered her." The girl blushed, her head in the clouds. The Archduke reminded them that they needed to return to the ballroom. Vivian thanked her for the help. After wishing the Archduke a good evening, the girl ran away. Glenn clenched his hand into a fist, thinking, 5 years. In 5 years, she will be 21. The Archduke continued to periodically visit the city and keep an eye on Vivian. Glenn, sitting in his office, asks the butler if the Earl of Lewis is having an official reception. The butler replies that he is not sure about this. Perhaps he should send a letter. The man answered negatively, because it would be too obvious. He missed Vivian very much. All the last 5 years he thought only about her. Sitting in the garden late at night, Glenn looked into the beautiful starry sky. Hearing a rustling sound, he turned around and saw Vivian, wearing only her nightgown. He threw his jacket over her, wondering how she got through security. Every time a guest arrives at the mansion, the guards inform the butler, and he informs the owner. But no one informed the Archduke about Vivian's arrival. The girl looked strange. Looking closely into her eyes, the Archduke noticed traces of black magic. Vivian has no magic at all, so she definitely wouldn't be able to use it. Then someone else cast this spell on her. Glenn wondered what kind of bastard dared to use black magic on his dear Vivian. If someone used a mind-targeting spell, it could negatively affect her. The girl pressed herself against the Archduke's chest. Glenn became excited and blushed. He looked at sweet Vivian and tried to mentally calm himself down. First, he needed to figure out what kind of magic this was. He lifted her face and took a closer look, finding out that it was a damn charm. Magic that allows you to summon an evil spirit that attacks a specific target. Glenn was absolutely sure that Crown Prince Arthur Asmod did it. This bastard doesn't have the courage to challenge the Archduke openly. That's why he always tries to harm him unnoticed. The Archduke was angry. He believed that the prince would pay for using Vivian. The girl rushed to hug the Archduke. She said that she really liked him. Tears appeared in Vivian's eyes. She said that she did not want to get married. Glenn assumed that there were many families who wanted to marry their offspring to her. He wanted to deal with them later, but the girl cried and said that she would love the Archduke all her life. The Archduke asked if it might be better to leave it that way. Vivian screamed that she couldn't live her whole life alone, just looking at him from afar. She also needs to get married. Whether she wants to or not, she has to do it. She began hitting his chest with her fists, emphasizing that the Archduke was a fool. He wondered if Vivian wasn't currently under the influence of a damn charm. The Archduke had an epiphany and smiled shyly. She is harmless in herself and cannot harm others. Therefore, darkness cannot penetrate into it. Vivian continued to grumble at the Archduke, saying that his smile annoyed her. He was so handsome that it made her furious. She wanted to be the only one looking at this beauty, but the Archduke is too popular. Glenn suggested that Vivian might kidnap him, lock him up and watch him. Vivian was inspired by this idea. She clarified whether it was really possible, and the Archduke allowed her to do what she wanted. The girl rummaged in her pocket and took out a rope, asking if she could tie him up. Glenn was surprised by the girl's preferences and silently extended his hands to her. Vivian began to tie them together contentedly. The Archduke thought that he could easily break the rope. Vivian happily led the Archduke to her room, holding him by the rope. Glenn asked how she was going to kidnap him, even if her alias was Rabbit. Vivian emphasized that she was not, in fact, a rabbit. The Archduke continued, "Every time Vivian comes to the Imperial Palace, she runs away to her brothers. Why not just have them at home?" The girl replied that her mother does not like them, and that rabbits prefer to play in nature. Coming out of the bushes, a carriage was waiting for them on the road. Glenn was surprised. There should be security here. Looking around, he saw sleeping knights. Vivian couldn't turn them off with a stick or fist. The man asked her what happened. The girl happily replied that she had given them candy. Glenn suggested that these were magical candies with a sleeping effect. It is unlikely that they would eat them on their own, which means Vivian put it in their mouths. This angered the Archduke, because she did not feed him like that. The coachman was delighted to see Vivian return. Then he saw the half-sleeping Archduke, and he was shocked that he was coming to visit them at night and in this form. The knights woke up from the noise. The Archduke looked out of the cart and ordered them to set off faster. From the window, he told his charges that he was being kidnapped, but there was no need to look for him. He would return. The knights protested. They did not understand what was happening and wanted to save the master. The Archduke ran his finger at his neck, hinting that they would not live if they followed them. And they went to Lewis County. The girl ran through the corridors, saying that the Archduke was now hers. Glenn confirmed her words. Reaching the door, she joyfully announced that this was her room. The Archduke was excited. Entering the room, he saw many portraits with his image and many other paraphernalia. This situation was extremely confusing. There's even a full-length pillow. The Archduke wondered if Vivian slept with her every night. He felt ashamed of his such frank thoughts, and he blushed. Vivian asked what was wrong with him. Glenn broke the rope, grabbed Vivian in his arms, and carried her to bed. He hugged her tightly, thinking how cute she was. Glenn said he doesn't know what he'll do if this continues. The girl jumped up, offering help, and she began to tie his hands again. Now he won't be able to do anything. Vivian praised the indescribable beauty of the Archduke. She wanted to draw him. The Archduke was embarrassed. He suggested that Vivian be patient for a while. The girl muttered something, remembering how it was in the novel she took from Marina, and then she tore the Archduke's shirt in shreds. Glenn, in a panic, shouted questioningly what kind of novel this was. Vivian sat down next to him, beaming with happiness, looking at the Archduke. Glenn sheepishly said, "If Vivian is so interested, she can touch it." The girl was delighted and began to touch the Archduke's stomach, emphasizing how hard it was. Such pumped-up muscles. She decided to take this into account when she drew. Vivian moved closer to the Archduke's face. His eyelashes seemed unusually beautiful to the girl. She asked if she could kiss him. The man hesitated. He asked her not to rush, but Vivian was already reaching out to him. They bumped their foreheads, and Glenn said, afraid to upset her, that it was not a kiss. Vivian was surprised, innocently asking how it should be. The Archduke emphasized, more gently, and she could try to bite lightly. Vivian was indignant. If she bites him, the Archduke will be hurt. The man said what she tried to do was more painful. After thinking a little, Vivian leaned over to the Archduke and kissed him on the lips. Glenn praised her, saying that now she had done everything right. Vivian was very embarrassed, hiding her face behind her hands. The Archduke laughed and asked if she wanted to marry him. She became upset, saying how she could marry the Archduke. She cannot marry the Archduke. Glenn regretted this question. He believed that it would be better if Vivian woke up now. He wanted to see the real her, and not an image inspired by magic. He had been waiting for this for 5 whole years. He knew very well the difference in their position, and I didn't want to give rise to rumors like, "A girl the Archduke will play with and throw away like an unnecessary toy." Vivian added that her father would not agree to this. The Archduke occupies too high a position. Vivian believed that by marrying someone of her level, you could live happily. The man protested, saying that this was her father's opinion, not his. He asked if she could be happy if she married someone else, because she really liked the Archduke. Vivian began to cry. Glenn mentally kicked himself for making her cry. The girl said affirmatively, "Glenn Lennox is a fool." The Archduke beamed when Vivian called him by name. The girl began to beat Glenn, saying that he did not understand anything at all. Glenn laughed, emphasizing that he was not in pain at all. For him, her blows are like a blow from a rabbit's foot. Vivian became even more furious, saying that she couldn't stand him. The Archduke smiled and, looking at the girl, said, "But he loves her." She became depressed, thinking that the Archduke loved himself no matter what. And Glenn clarified, he said he loved her, Vivian. It seems that this feeling no longer fits the definition of, "I like you." He again confessed his love to her. She couldn't believe it. Tears were welling up in her eyes. Vivian began to shake and fell on top of the Archduke. Glenn believed that the magic had ended. He sighed with relief. After everything that happened, Glenn rode home in the carriage and thought about the love contract. Although this is childish, a love contract is also a relationship. Now Vivian was misled, but he did not plan to part with her for anything in the world. Glenn caught her so well and will never let her go again. The knights rode in very high tension. The Archduke's smile seemed too happy to them. It gives them chills. The next morning, Vivian rubbed herself lovingly against her large pillow with the Archduke, believing that the Archduke's smile was beautiful even in his sleep. All because of a goodnight kiss. At breakfast, the maid unobtrusively asked Vivian if she had gone to bed late yesterday. The girl answered positively, thinking that she probably wanted to find out what happened at night. Vivian remembered Kaysen's behavior, and her face looked like she was going to vomit. The maid became concerned about Mrs. Well-being. The girl replied that she was simply dizzy from the sudden flood of memories. The maid tapped her on the shoulder, telling her to be careful. She couldn't stand it, and still asked about last night. "Is it true that Miss has been communicating with His Majesty the Archduke since last week?" She knelt down in front of Vivian and grabbed her hands. The girl answered awkwardly. She'd already heard everything. The maid asked if she had any relationship before. She answered negatively. The maid asked if Miss understood what she meant by relationship. The girl laughed, saying that a relationship is a relationship. How could it be otherwise? The maid emphasized that she meant sexual relations. Vivian thought for a moment, then blushed, shouting that they had nothing like that. Emma was very worried. Miss liked the Archduke so much that she was ready to give him all of herself. Vivian asked her not to worry so much. The girl laughed, saying, even if she gave her all, it would not be of any use to the Archduke. The maid emphasized that Miss was worth remembering. No matter how handsome and attractive the Archduke is, he must treat her well. She shouldn't trust him 100%. Emma sighed heavily for a long time and then left the room. After the day Vivian kidnapped the Archduke, Marina went to the library and found her bag open, as if someone had been rummaging through it. This surprised her. Marina didn't think it looked like a thief. But what could have happened to her bag then? Vivian receives gifts from the Archduke, flowers the color of her hair, and a letter. She is delighted that he wrote it personally and immediately rushes to read it. Jumping onto the bed, the girl embarrassedly rubs herself against the paper of the letter, feeling the scent of the Archduke. She is very glad that Glenn wrote her at least one letter. Vivian examines it, admiring the Archduke's beautiful handwriting. The girl tells the maid that she is about to melt with happiness. She awkwardly tells her that it is good. In the letter, the Archduke asks Vivian if she slept well, and if she liked his gifts. He admits that he chose them, thinking about her. He writes that he is bored and will come for dinner in the evening. Vivian jumped up. She was very happy about the Archduke's offer to go on a date. The happy girl rushed to hug the maid Emma. She joyfully exclaimed that she was going on a date with the Archduke. Vivian began jumping around the room in delight and shouting that she would have a date with Glenn. Emma warned her to be careful. The maid told Vivian to calm down and finally open the gift, to which she received the girl's joyful consent. Having unpacked the gift, the girl saw a beautiful dress. Emma said it was the first time she had seen a dress with so much jewelry. Vivian examines the sparkling dress. It seems to her that the lace on it is just a work of art. The maid asked the girl how the Archduke knew her size. There was an awkward pause, and Vivian interrupted it, suggesting that they quickly open the next box of gifts. The unpacking of gifts was interrupted by a knock on the door from the butler. He said that the gentleman urgently calls Lady Vivian to his place. The girl was very surprised, because her father was very busy due to work. She didn't understand why she was called so suddenly. Vivian entered her father's room. A man unknown to her until that moment was sitting on the sofa in the room. The man stood up and introduced himself. It was Baron Evan Harris. It seemed to the girl that she had already heard this name somewhere. Rockbell's cousin, the same Mrs. Mary Rockbell, who manages the affairs of the Lewis estate. She asked him what brought him here, and if everything was okay with Mrs. Rockbell. Having not heard an answer, Vivian turned her gaze to her father sitting opposite her and the large suitcase that stood next to her. The girl's father was sitting in a chair at the end of the room. He was in the mood for a serious conversation and invited her to sit down. Vivian learns from him that today she is going on vacation to recover, and Baron Harris must take care of her. This worries the girl very much. She cannot believe that she is being sent on vacation while she has a date planned with Glenn. If she leaves, then the relationship with him will be temporarily ended. Vivian asks her father not to send her on vacation because then she will not be able to see the Archduke. Her father interrupts her begging. He asks the girl if she knows where the bead she broke came from. Vivian is at a loss. She doesn't understand how he knows about this, because she didn't tell anyone about it. Marina enters the room. She looks guilty, as if asking for forgiveness. Perhaps it's because of the bead. The father invites the girl to sit down and tell Vivian everything about that bag before she got it at the academy. Marina sits down, takes a cup of tea, and begins to talk about the fact that there is a strange Professor Shannon. He often flashes in her environment. Crown Prince Asmod is very interested in magic, alchemy, the arts of the soul, and puppets. He found talented people from all over the continent and brought them together. Keel Shannon became one of them. This young man has knowledge of black magic, and he also received the Emperor's consent to practice it. After this story, the excited Vivian carefully asks Marina what kind of bead it was. Marina believed that it was some kind of trick. Most likely the bead was made by him. Vivian admitted that as soon as she opened the bag, the bead exploded. A friend said that perhaps Shannon's magic should have worked not only after a while, but also upon contact with the ball. After the explosion, all things should have scattered in different directions. The hidden ball, according to his idea, would have fallen out, and the one who picked it up would have been subjected to magic. Vivian assumed that the person for whom the spell was intended was Marina, not her. Then Marina said that earlier he had offered her to study black magic, but she refused, and maybe because of this Professor Shannon wanted to take revenge on her. He had no problem dealing with those he didn't like, and tried to follow all the orders of the Crown Prince. Vivian now realized that everything had failed because she took the bead instead of her friend, and so the girl fell under the spell. A friend winked at her and said that Vivian is now like a relic, a unique specimen. Anyway, the point is that the Crown Prince is behind all this. The father confirmed Marina's words. The Archduke and the Crown Prince initially did not have a good relationship. It was not clear whether this was all due to personal hostility or political infighting. Vivian wanted to ask the Archduke about this later. The father asked Vivian if the Archduke expressed sympathy for her. Vivian tried to say something in favor of the Archduke, but her father interrupted her. The man said the Archduke was the most dangerous man he had ever seen. Vivian trembled. She couldn't even object to him. She was madly in love with the Archduke, but she also heard about his notoriety. He was described as the youngest swordmaster and a catastrophic genius. He was crazy and cruel. The Count argued that it was quite possible that the Archduke pretended to be interested in Vivian. In fact, he wanted to find out our relationship with the Crown Prince. The girl realized that the gifts and letters sent in the morning and how caring he was yesterday were all acting. Now it is clear that if you look at it from the Archduke's point of view, the easiest way to find out if the Earl of Lewis's family is related to the Crown Prince is to seduce her. Even if Glenn was deceiving Vivian, she still couldn't leave without saying goodbye. She didn't like this idea. The girl's father insisted that she leave as soon as possible before it was too late. He was worried that she had gotten into something dangerous. Vivian begs her father to say goodbye to the Archduke. She is confused and depressed. Tears ran down the girl's cheeks. With sadness and despair, she decides to write him a letter. In the letter, Vivian apologizes for such a response to his letter. She asks him to wait patiently until her family understands that he is not involved. After all, they have a contractual relationship, even if it is a trap. The girl collected her things and went out into the yard, where a carriage and relatives who came to see her off were already waiting for her. Kajin hurried to say goodbye to Vivian. He loudly called out to her and asked her to stay not long. He was carrying something in his hand. Kajin ran to his sister and grabbed her by the shoulders. She noticed tears on his face. This caused bewilderment in the girl. The guy extended his hand. In it was an amulet for Vivian. He wanted her to take it with her. She thanked him for this. Upset with what was happening, the brother said that this whole situation happened due to the loss of influence of the Lewis family. Kajin's behavior. He should not have spoken like that in the presence of his father. The girl hit her brother with her hand and called him a bastard. The guy resolutely promised his sister to return the influence of the Lewis family and make sure that no one would touch them again. Vivian wished him luck. The brother flared with confidence and anger, saying that these bastards would not even lay a finger on her. The girl was worried about whether he was in his right mind. Kajin turned around and walked away, shouting after her that she didn't understand anything and let her think as she wished. Vivian didn't understand what she had done wrong. The coachman asked if they could leave. Vivian entered the carriage and they drove off. She had no peace about what to do with the oath. She asked God for forgiveness for breaking her oath. Vivian wanted the Archduke to live prosperously, without turmoil and worries. Lennox possession. The butler hands the young master a letter, announcing that its sender is Miss Lewis. He grabbed the letter and immediately opened it, feeling very happy to receive it. He thought it was nice of Vivian, even though they were meeting in the evening. Apparently she couldn't wait. The Archduke began to read, and his eyes widened. Glenn crumpled the letter, put on his jacket, and headed out. The butler called out to His Highness. He turned around, and the butler was horrified. The Archduke's smile turned sinister. The Archduke said he was going to catch his runaway mate. The knights and the butler present were very frightened by his such smile. A heavy downpour began. The coachman shouted that the wheels were stuck. They had better wait in a safe place. Vivian got off the wagon with Emma's help, asking her to be careful as well. If it had not been for the rain, they would have reached in 2 days. The accompanying people built a tent under a tree. The girls were wet and shivering from the cold. The coachman suggested that the girls take the ball. It would make them warmer. The man said that the Earl of Lewis gave it to them with him. Vivian assumed it was an expensive, disposable magic item. Her family is not very rich, so finances must be limited. The girl began to cry. She prayed that everything would be fine with her father, mother, Cassian, and that they would not get sick. The rain was ending. Baron Harris asked if they wanted to eat something warm. Then their bodies will become warm. The men lit a fire and, together with Emma, began to prepare food. Vivian wondered if there was anything she could do to help. Looking at how the Baron cooked, she was surprised that he could do that too. Noticing her gaze, he asked if she needed anything. The girl waved shyly that she didn't need anything. Emma and Harris laughed. The knight handed Miss a mug of hot tea. Vivian thanked her and began to drink it. She was worried whether the Archduke had received the letter. She hoped that he would believe and understand her correctly. The man took off his helmet and asked if the food looked good. He praised himself, saying that he clearly had outstanding talent. Vivian was surprised to see the knight's face. She screamed, "It's him! He is the knight from the hunting competition." The knight confirmed her guesses, saying that he was honored that Miss remembered this. 7 years have passed since then, Vivian confirmed, emphasizing that she was 14 at the time. Vivian used to make jewelry, kick, and all the aristocrats, so that she could then give it to her loved ones. But her skill was not enough, so she was never able to give them to anyone. Then, at the competition, she struck up a conversation with this knight. He said since her jewelry had no owner, perhaps she could give it to him. He heard that if you receive such a gift, the competition will be successful. Vivian believed his words back then, but if you think about it now, he was just trying to comfort her. The knight called Miss out of his thoughts, saying that the meat was already ready. Vivian began to eat. Her eyes sparkled. It was amazingly delicious. The attendants were very pleased that Miss liked the food. They began to offer her more fried vegetables. There were also potatoes. There was also chicken soup, beef in a sauce with spices. Vivian found everything delicious, but she assumed that she was not a hamster. They have half a day left to travel. They decided that it would be better to spend the night in a hotel today. Vivian and her maid were settling down for bed, Miss emphasizing how much had happened today. Emma agreed, adding that traveling with Miss was fun. The girl thanked her for her words and said goodnight and went to bed. She hoped that she would dream of the Archduke. Before she had time to think about it, she fell asleep. Vivian was sitting in the dining room drinking tea when suddenly someone called out to her. Turning around, she saw her uncle. She was very surprised by this meeting and asked if he was passing through here. The man took an awkward pause, then said, "It's even good that it happened this way." He would like to introduce Vivian to someone. A man about her age appeared in front of them. His uncle introduced him as Viscount Alwyn. Alvin was pleased to meet you, saying that Miss was as beautiful as they said she was. Uncle, against Vivian's will, seated them at the same table. The girl didn't like this very much. She thought that a noble lady, traveling to a place where she could relax, suddenly found herself at a bride's show. Her father would never have allowed such an absurd situation to happen. Vivian concluded that it was her uncle's initiative. The man said that this was their first meeting. His name is Scott Alvin. Vivian thought, holding a viewing party in such a hotel, this man is clearly not himself. She awkwardly introduced herself. Scott winked at the girl, telling her not to worry so much. Vivian thought she wasn't worried. She just didn't like him. The man asked if he could call her Vivian, or perhaps some other affectionate nickname. He began to throw out options. Vivi, Viv, Anna, asking which one she liked. Vivian was very angry about this. She, barely restraining herself, replied that at the first meeting, use a name or nickname. He interrupted her, saying that for convenience, Miss could call him Scott. The Viscount began to tell Vivian that not so long ago, a gold mine was found on his estate, so he's a little rich. Vivian thought she was showing off her money from the first meeting. Of course, her family lost their wealth, but doesn't her uncle think that's too much? The uncle sat nearby, clearly pretending that he was not eavesdropping on anything. She had known her uncle since he spent his entire fortune on gambling. Scott continued, saying that Vivian would benefit greatly from marrying him. He emphasized that Miss probably wants to wear not old, but luxurious and elegant dresses. It is clear that in a poor house, Miss could not open up properly. But if she marries him... Vivian jumped up and, slamming her hands on the table, ordered him to stop. She could no longer listen to it. In a rage, Vivian poured a glass of water on the Baron. She said Earl Lewis's family is not rich, but not rich enough to beg for something from a man like him. She believed that it was her uncle who was going to ask him for money. Pointing in his direction, she shouted what kind of gambling he had lost his money on this time. The man jumped up. He wanted to object, but Vivian did not allow him to say a word. She asked him if it was not too much to sell his niece in order to earn money. My uncle thought Vivian was talking nonsense. The Baron was angered by her words, and he swung his hand at her. Vivian screamed, covering her face. There was no blow. Opening her eyes, she saw the Archduke holding the Baron by the neck. Knights rushed to their aid.